welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's embroidery tutorial, we're going over hats. That's right, one of the most popular requests I get when it comes to embroidery are about hats. So, hats come in many different shapes and sizes and thicknesses and firmness. My preferred hat to use for personal wear and also to sell in my shop are these more like loosey goosey dad hats. So today I'm going to show you how I do this beautiful little knockdown stitch in the back that's like a sewing machine silhouette, and then we're going to go over the lettering and how we do the 3D puff. I digitized all of this in Luxe, so I'm first going to show you how I do that, and then we'll get into actually making the hat. Altogether, it's very, very quick. It's very simple. There's really not a whole lot to it, and it's just a really cute hat. So I will have links for all of the material that I use in today's tutorial down in the description of this video. I'll link where I get my hats. I know for a lot of us who embroider on hats and sell hats, there's not a lot out there right now. Like a lot of different brands are sold out everywhere. This one here that I use, I don't remember. This is Sportsman. So I will have a link for it down below. This is usually pretty easy to find and they come in a lot of different colors. The idea here that I had was I wanted to use a knockdown stitch as like a background kind of shaded silhouette image, and then we could put text over it. You could do this with any design. Obviously, I'm a big sewer, so I wanted to do a cute little sewing machine back there, but you could really do this with any design at all. So if you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Any questions at all, leave them down in the comment section. I will have timestamps for every single step of this tutorial, so if you're interested in just how to digitize or just how to do the 3D puff, make sure you check the description of this video and I will have the timestamp listed there. Just click on it and it's going to take you straight there in the video. In today's tutorial, I will be using the Ricoma EM1010, which is a 10 needle, multi-needle embroidery machine. It makes just this all so much easier. Also, it's caps. Caps can be very challenging to embroider on a single needle flatbed machine. It's much easier to do it on a multi-needle machine where you have a special hoop to do it. It's just a lot easier. If you're gonna do a lot of caps, you're gonna want a machine like this. So if you're interested in that, I will have a link for my machine down in the description of this video. All right, let's get started. So to digitize this hat, I'm starting with Luxe. Now, Chroma is a digitizing software and there are different levels of Chroma, and it depends. If you buy a Ricoma machine, it'll depend which version you get. With my version, I did get Inspire, so the EM1010 10 needle embroidery machine comes with the Chroma Inspire, which is the basic level. This is the Luxe, which is their highest level. And it has a lot of really cool features in it, so I like to use it when I can. So for this hat design, we're going to start with a blank slate here. And now I want that background of the sewing machine. So I actually have this digital file here, which is something I use all the time on my notebook holders. I will have a link for this pattern down in the description of the video. But what I want is this outline of this machine, but I don't need all the bells and whistles. So pretty much all I need is this blue part here. So I'm just going to go through and I can select all the other pieces and just delete them. So I'm just going to click everything that's not that blue main body because I don't really need the rest of this stuff, and then I'll just delete it. Now, I'm making sure I don't actually save this file because I don't want to modify the file. So when I'm done with this, I won't save it. So then I have this little thread piece over here. I don't need that. So I'm just going to select it and then delete it. Same with this bit here. Don't need that. All I need is this shape here. All right, so that looks okay. So now I'm just going to select all of this and copy it and bring it over to my design. There we go. Now, this is where I need to figure out the size that I want this to be. And since I've made hats before, I know I don't really want the height to be more than 2.5 inches. So I'm actually going to take this down so that it's 2 inches high and click apply. And that's going to resize all of this. Now, this is not the background that I want. So now that I have this the size I wanted, I'm going to select my design and I'm going to right click it, click utility, and then create nap blocker. 0.16 inches away from the design, that'll work. Let's click OK. And now you can see it created this knockdown stitch. This knockdown stitch is called the complex fill. While I have that selected, I'm actually going to change its color. So all I have to do is go down here to all of my colors, and I can just right click one of the colors and it'll change my complex fill. So now I have two different thread changes here. I have the main body of the sewing machine, and then I have that complex fill, which is my knockdown. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the sewing machine because I don't need that anymore. Now, as you can see, it kind of expanded the design over here. I don't really want that. I want this to look more like an actual throat in a sewing machine. So I'm going to go up here and click on the shape tool, and that's going to give me all of the points for this. So I can actually just take this point here and just drag it on up. It even creates a nice little wobbly arch, something like that. Click return. And now I have a design that looks more like a sewing machine. It doesn't have to look perfect. It just has to look somewhat like a sewing machine. So now I'm going to check the size real quick. All right, so the size is 3.05 inches wide by 2.32 inches high. That will work. Okay, so we have our background. Now, before we move on, let's actually deal with this a little bit more. When we're dealing with hats, we always want to stitch from the center out, because especially with these dad caps, they can kind of smush up and shift around on us. So we want to start in the center and move out. So let's go ahead and select this. Select our shape tool. And this is going to tell us where we start and stop. So see down here we have the red dot, and then when I hover over it, I also have that green dot. That means the start and stop are in the same place. So I want to move the start towards the center, and I can move the stop towards here. This yellow line right here, that's the diagonal of which this is all going to stitch. So if I wanted this to go a little bit more of an angle like this, I could do that. If you want to go straight up and down, straight left and right, you could do that as well. So let's click return. There we go. So now this is what it's going to look like. So let's look at the 3D of it. Okay. And let's run through it real quick. I just want to see how it's going to stitch out. So you can see I just pushed the slow redraw button up here, and I can just drag this, and it's going to show me. It's going to start in the middle. It's going to go out, work its way down. And then it's going to go back down there, work its way back. That'll work. I think that'll work. Ideally, I would like it to start in the middle and go out towards the top and down towards the bottom. You could definitely do that with a little bit more work, but I find this will probably be okay. All right, so the background is done. Now let's work on the text. Let's go over here to the side to our text key and just select anywhere. There we go. See, I already have the font that I've been using. So if you go over here, now not all of these fonts are available depending on the version you have. If you have Luxe, all these will be available. But you can see you have your basic fonts here, just regular old one colored fonts. And then you can go down here and you have different types of monograms, which are really cool. We've used that in a previous one. And then we have our puffies. Now you means 3D print. It means it's digitized specifically for puff foam underneath, and we'll take a look at that in just a minute, and I'll show you how that's different. So let's figure out what we want to do with our font. So the one I want to use is Varsity Puffy, and then up here in this box we're going to put our text. I'm going to do made in all caps, click apply. There we go. Let me zoom out a bit. Now you can see this is much bigger than I want it to be. I don't want it to be this big. So I don't want the width of this to be more than about 3 1/4. So I'm going to select the whole text, go over here, and the width up here, I'm just going to change it to 3.25. It'll automatically change the height as well. Click OK. And here we go. So now we've got made. Now let's do the next text for it. Just select anywhere. And then let's do it in all caps, click apply. There we go. Let's take a look at the height of this one for made. The height of that is 0.89. Let's make it the same height. 0.89. Apply. There we go. Now you could do made it on all the same, the same text selection. but I like to be able to move this around if I want to. All right, so here we go. So now this would stitch out with the complex fill in the background, and then it's going to stitch out the text. Now, I want more control over the text. I want it to start from the center. I want it to work its way out. So before we do that, let's see if we can align this a little bit better. I'm going to select everything, right click, click align, and I want to do vertical center. No, I don't. So I'm going to select all of this, right click, click align, and click horizontal center. There we go. And now everything is centered like this. I have more control over where I put the letters. So the next thing I want to do is I want to make sure when this stitches out, it stitches out this background first, and then it does the 3D puff over it. And I want it to start at the A and then go to M, then go D, E, and then it can go I and T. Because I still want to do center out each time. So let's go over to the letters over here. We're going to select the text, right click, and say breakup text. There we go. Now you can see each thing is its own group. The background of the M is a group, the background of an A is a group. So all I have to do is take that A group and move it up so that it's above the M. So then it will start A, M, and then it will go D, E. Let's do the same thing for the puff down here. There we go. So now the 3D puff is going to do the same thing. Now let's repeat this for it. So I'm going to select the text, right click, do breakup text. And there we go. And I want all of the background steps, so all the blue font here, I want that to go all at the same time. So I'm going to select the background for it and just move it up so that it goes after the E. There we go. Perfect. So now let's look at what makes this a 3D puff font. Let's zoom in and we'll take a look at the A. Now, if we really get in here, you see how we have the stitching that goes side to side all around here, and then we have these little caps right here. These little caps are what make this 3D puff. Because the stitching is a really dense satin stitch, it's going to hold that foam in really well. And then see down here, the stitching goes up and down, up and down, up and down. Well, if we just left it like that, our little puff foam is going to peek out the edges here. So these little caps just tuck in the raw edges of our foam, and then we cover it up, and that's what makes this a foam puff. However, if you just really like this design, you don't have to use foam. I've made plenty of hats where we actually use the same font, but we didn't use any foam underneath it because we just liked the way it looked, and it still stitched out really nicely. So I'm going to change the colors around just a little bit. I don't want the background and the letters to be the same. So I'm going to change the background to this purple, and we can change all of our puff lettering. Let's just select all of them. We can change that to like a fun pink. There we go. I like to change the colors around just to get a better idea of how I'm actually going to stitch it out, just to make sure I actually like what I picked. So that's fun. Look at that. All right, so the last thing I want to do, because this blob back here, I mean, it looks like a sewing machine for the most part. I like it. But the one thing it's missing is a needle. So I'm just going to add a needle. So I'm going to go over here to my artwork tool, select it, and click pen. And then I'm just going to draw a little triangle here. Nothing fancy. There we go. Little needle. All done. Click return. And then go to the selection tool. And I have it selected. You can see this is over here. It is labeled artwork. I can select it, right click it, let's convert it to a satin stitch. There we go. Now it's just a little needle. It's nothing big, but you know, these things are nice. So I'm going to change that color to black. There we go. You can get a lot more creative with that. You can add all kinds of stuff to this, but these are just some of like the basic tools in Luxe that I really like. It makes something like this where I just have an idea. I can do it really quickly. You know, I can just knock out a knockdown stitch, do my 3D puff text, and then I can take it to the machine and stitch it out. So let's select all of it and check our size. All right, the width of the entire thing is 3 1/4. The height is 2.32. That is a larger design for me, but I know it will fit in my cap hoop, so this will work on a hat. Now you want to always go through all of your steps and make sure it's in the right order. So it's going to do the knockdown first, start with the A background, go to the M, then go D, E, I, T, and then we're going to start with the A puff, and then the M, and then the same order, and the last thing it'll do is a needle. All right, so this is all good. We just have to put it on our flash drive and then get it on our machine and stitch it out. Okay, so let's talk about the basics. First, you're gonna need a hat, right? I mean, we're embroidering on a hat. You're gonna need a hat. Like I said, there's so many options when it comes to hats. I do not have experience embroidering on the really stiff, like Richardson hats that are just really, really stiff. Those are needle breakers. I haven't worked up the courage to do that yet. They're also sold out almost everywhere. So these, I think these are called dad hats. They're just really loose and flimsy. A lot of people struggle with that because they are so flimsy. So I'm going to show you what I do with these today to make it easier to work with. Next, you're going to need some sort of a hoop for your hat. So this is the one that came with my machine. As you can see, it has a clamp. I'll show you how I hoop it and everything. There are other hoops out there that are much easier to use than this. However, they work with different embroidery machines. So those ones don't work with my particular machine. But there are many options for hooping these hats if this kind of hurts your fingers. Next is the stabilizer. This is actually cutaway stabilizer, and I'm using it today because I have a lot going on this hat. However, normally I use tearaway stabilizer. So normally I use 2 layers of tearaway stabilizer for my hat. However, for this hat, when I was testing it, I honestly accidentally used 2 layers of the cutaway. But it worked out so well, and I have no registration issues, nothing moved at all. So I'm going to use that for the tutorial again today. Just note that by using the cutaway, this is a little bit more stiff back here, and you have a little bit, you know, of the extra stuff here. So you can still cut that off, get it cleaned up. Tearaway is easier because you can just tear it away. However, tearaway is thinner or more flimsy than cutaway, so it can shift on you. So those are the things to think about. If you're just starting out, I would suggest using the cutaway because you're going to have less issues than you do with the tearaway. All right, here's all the other stuff for today's tutorial. First, these little, what are these, like binder clips? These things, they're curved. They work really well at securing the hat down in the back so that we get it as tight as possible. So I'll show you how I use those when I hoop the hat. Next, I got some sticky stuff. This is my 505 basting spray. I basted all the layers of cutaway together. I basted the hat to the cutaway. Again, the biggest thing with especially these looser hats is prevent as much movement as possible. We want to keep it totally flat. Next, foam. So I'm doing a 3D puff, and 3D puff just means you can see the letters. They kind of puff out. They come out further than the rest of the embroidery. It's not just thread that's like part of the hat, they stick out more. And it gives it a really, really cool look. 3D puff is very fun. However, not all puff material is created equal. You can definitely get this puff foam, craft foam from your craft store or Walmart, but it doesn't always work great. So this foam is actually made for embroidery. So I do highly suggest you get foam that's made for embroidery. Next, I have my thread. I'll be using this variegated thread for the background, and then I have this pink thread for that like outline of the letters, and then I'll be using white thread to go with the puff. Again, I highly encourage you, always use the same color puff as thread, because even with the best digitizing, sometimes this puff kind of peeks through the thread, and if you're using a black puff with white thread, you're probably gonna see it, and it's gonna look a little messy. All right, let's talk about the pokey things. I have some fabric scissors. I have some snips for my thread, some tweezers. This little combo here, this is like our embroidery surgical combo. You pull and you cut, and you pull and you cut, and you pull and you cut. So this, I highly suggest this duo right here. Next, I've got my special embroidery scissors that are nice and curved. These are especially good for applique, but it's also really helpful at cutting that cutaway material on the back of the hat without cutting the hat. And then a rotary cutter to cut our stabilizer. I have a ruler, again, for the stabilizer. And then a heat gun. Now, I know this is kind of random, but a heat gun is really helpful. After we're done with the hat, if we do have any of that foam kind of sticking through the thread, we can heat it up. We can blast it with a heat gun real quick, and it'll shrink up. The foam shrinks down. And that cleans it up without you having to worry about carefully cutting foam and then accidentally cutting your thread. It's a helpful tool in embroidery. I highly suggest you get a heat gun. All right, first thing I like to do is cut strips of my stabilizer for my hat. Now, regardless if it's cutaway or tearaway, I cut 2 strips that are about 4 inches wide and then width of fabric. So for this, it's almost 12 inches. So I'm just gonna cut 2 strips. They don't have to be perfect. It's going to be eaten up anyways. You really want stabilization in your hat so that it doesn't move around, especially with these loosey goosey material hats we're using. Next thing I do is grab my basting spray, give it a good shake, and then I just spray one of the stabilizers, and then I glue the other one to it, just like that. All right, so now we want to grab our cap hoop, and this is a cap station. So this is what you're going to use to install your hat onto your hoop. So I'm just going to take my cap hoop and snap it in. There's 3 snaps, 1, 2, and then 1 on the bottom. So there's my cap station, and my cap hoop is installed on there nice and tight. And then what I'm going to do is take my stabilizer and I just kind of tuck it underneath this little lip right here, just like that. So now when prepping your hat, make sure you open it up, take out the paper backing. You don't, I mean, this is great stabilization. We've all stitched over this on accident before, and it comes out really nice, but you don't want it. And then undo the back. So this has this little buckle back here. I'm just going to pull it out and completely undo the back. There we go. And then flatten out your bill. So see how I'm just making it totally flat. It's nice and curved. We will curve it again later, but for this, I want this nice and flat, just like that. Okay, so put your stabilizer back if you moved it, and then give the top of your stabilizer a quick spray with your basting spray. Take your hat, and your hat should have this little lip here. Pull that out. So when we insert this on, we're gonna push this over our stabilizer. It gets sticky, I know. And you see how that lip, I'm gonna line it up just like that. It's over that bar right now. I'm gonna put it under there, but I'm just moving it there to line it up and kind of give my hat a minute to stick to my stabilizer. And then I pull it back and I pull all of it together. I pull the hat and the stabilizer back together and then push it underneath that lip and then just slowly kind of back and forth. It should be tight, but I just wedge it in there just like that. And as I'm doing this, I'm wedging in the hat and the stabilizer all together so it stays nice and even and I don't have any material bunching anywhere. There we go. So now you can see my hat is a bit of a mess, but I have this tucked in really nicely around the sides, which is what I want. So now I'm going to work on cleaning up this. So I give this a little tug over here and I start smoothing this all out. And then I'm going to reach underneath here and I'm going to pull on the bottom of my hat so that it wraps around these prongs right here. See how we have these 2 prongs here? The bottom of my cap needs to wrap underneath those prongs. So pull it nice and tight. And when you're looking at the sides of this cap here, it needs to be flat all the way along the side. So you see over here, sometimes this little flap over here likes to tuck underneath the cap. We don't want that. It needs to stay straight, and it's going to stay flat all the way underneath our hook over here. You're going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay, now we're going to take this metal bar and we're going to wrap it around. And if you see this bar, it has these little teeth right here. Those teeth have to go in this seam right here, the seam between the bill and the fabric part of your cap. They have to go in that seam. Don't let them hang down here. That will not work for you. Keep it in that seam and do your best to keep everything nice and tight. You might want to rotate your cap just a bit to the left because as we tighten this, the whole cap likes to move to the right. It's not that big of a deal if it's not perfectly centered. We can always adjust at the machine for that, but just to make it a little bit easier, just push it to the left a little bit. Now, you see how I have it all nice and tucked into that seam? It's not popping out anywhere. And now the hard part, we're going to wrap this little dangling bit around the hook that's already down there without losing our stitching. All right, and once it's wrapped around there, it should stay pretty well. Now, this part shouldn't be easy. If you can just quickly take this and just flip it up without any extra effort, it's too loose. It needs to be tight. But if it's too tight, it will break. You can fix it, but it will break. So I've learned both problems. So what I do is I pinch right here. There's little prongs. You can pinch them. I pinch those as I'm pulling up this bottom lever here to make sure it doesn't pop out. There we go. And now it's nice and tight. Now you can see the hat got a little bunched up during all this. So I'm just going to kind of work it with my fingers and kind of pinch it up and then smooth it back down. Remember, we have that glue on the stabilizer, so that should help. There we go. All right, and then finally I'm going to take these binder clips, and remember how I have these little bars under here? I wrap my hat underneath those bars, and then I pull it down on the side really well, and I take my binder clip so that it's curved on the top towards the hat. I clip it on the little bars down here, and then I twist it up. So clipping it on and then twisting it up pulls that side nice and tight. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. All right, so once my cap is nice and firm and in place, I can remove it from the cap station and just pull it off like that. And you see, now it's all ready to go. It's hooped really nicely. Everything is nice and tight. And now we're going to go put it on the embroidery machine. Okay, when putting caps on embroidery machines, first of all, you need to turn it to the side. I always go to the left. You can go to the right, whatever you want. But you turn it to the side, push it in, and then rotate it. Now, those 3 clicks we had on our cap station, we have those exact same clicks on this machine. So we're going to line it up just like we did on the cap station, and we're going to click 3 times. 1, 2, and then on the bottom. Don't forget the bottom. 3. It's very easy to forget to do that, and you will have problems. Just make sure you get all 3 clicks. I usually like to pull on it a little bit too to make sure it's all nice in place. There we go. So as you can see, I already have my design loaded. It has the cap setting already. If you go to design set, down here, you can pick your hoop. I already picked cap, which is good. And so when you do cap, it's going to make it upside down and it's going to show you the hoop. Now this design is about as big as I'm going to go. I don't really want a bigger design than this, but it does still work. So then we're going to check our threads. And for this, there are 4 colors, again, whatever you have. The big thing I want you to remember is that you want to stop the machine before you apply your foam, and you want to stop it after you apply your foam, especially if you have more stitching to do after that. So this step number 2 here, that's the outline of the letters. I want it to stop then so I can tape down my foam and then continue on, stitch the foam down, and then stop so I can pull up the foam and then continue stitching the last step. So just make sure you have the machine stop where you need it to stop. All right, so I'm going to select needle number 1 so I can center this. So when I push down this needle number 1, I can see it doesn't line up perfectly with that center seam. So I'm going to hold it down while I use the arrows to gently move the hat where I need it. There we go. Okay, so now I know my design is centered. That's great. So now the last thing I need to do before I start is trace out my design to make sure it'll actually fit on my hat and I'm not going to hit any metal or anything like that. So we're just trace it out real quick. It goes up pretty high. It doesn't go down too low. I could probably get it a little bit lower, but let's see. I don't like to go too low because it starts becoming easy to break things down there. Okay, before we start the machine, I'm going to pull on my little binder clips here, and I'm just going to rotate them and tighten them. I find that moving the hat from the hooping station or the cap station over to the machine, it loosens up the hat just a bit. So I like to tighten it up, press it down, make sure there's no wrinkles. All right, so now we're just going to start stitching. It's going to do the background silhouette of the sewing machine first, and then the outline of the letters, and then it'll stop and we'll do the foam. Okay, so I have the background and the little outline of the letters stitched out, and now I'm going to add my foam. So I just cut a rectangle of foam that is quite a bit bigger than I need it to be. So if it shifts on me, it shouldn't be too big of a deal. And then I also use some tape to hold it in place. Now I am going to hold this foam down when it first gets started but then I'm gonna rely on the tape for the rest of it. So make sure it's completely covering the area that's going to have foam. All right, so now we're going to start the next step. And like I said, I'm going to hold it far away from the needle and hold it just for a little bit while I get started. And this is going to create that inner puffy letter. Okay, so this is actually great. So my bobbin thread ran out, and I can tell because I have a thread break error, but my thread here is not broken, which means I'm out of bobbin thread. And now running out of bobbin thread on a hat is very, very difficult because you can't get to the bobbin. You actually have to take the hat off the hoop, which I know is nerve-wracking because what if it all moves? It shouldn't, you should be good, but let's first just cut it. Okay, and now I'm gonna gently remove it from the machine. I'm not taking the hat off the hoop. I'm just taking the hat hoop off the machine, just like that, see? I'm just gonna gently put it down here. Okay, now let's check our bobbin. Pull it out. And yep, we've got no bobbin, so I'm gonna go grab another bobbin. And I am using these little magnetic bobbins. You can see on one side it's just plastic, on the other side it's a magnet. I highly encourage these for any embroidery machine, regardless if it's multi-needle, if it can take it. So for example, my Bernina cannot take these. There we go, and I'm just gonna put this back in. All right, bobbin is in there, tail is out. Now let's put the cap back on. So I'm just very gently going to take this, rotate it on just like I did in the beginning. Very gently, especially because I have this foam here. I don't want to accidentally rip it and then move everything around. Make sure all 3 clicks go through. All right, and I'm not messing with down here. I'm not messing with the firmness of my cap because I just want it to stay where it is. So now I'm just going to push that back down and let it start again. Okay, this time the thread actually it didn't break, it just came out of the needle, which happens sometimes. All right, so the puff step is done. Now all we have to do is remove this. It should come up pretty easily. That much work. There we go. Oh, that's looking cool. Okay, I just have one more step left. I wanted to add a little needle right here, so I'm gonna run that and then we're done. Okay, once you're done, you can just remove the whole cap and its hoop from the machine. Make sure you twist it to get it out. All right, so here's our cap and its hoop. It looks so good. You can see we still have a little bit of the puff here. You can just pull that out with your fingers. Depending on how small it is, you might want to use tweezers, but it comes out really nice. And I don't know if you can see, but the puff is a little messy in some spots. It's very, very hard to see since it's the same color as our thread, but I'm gonna take that down too. So let's remove all of our clips. And let's go ahead and just unhook that. There we go. Looking good. All right, so if you used a tearaway stabilizer, you can just come in here and just whoop, tear it away. But since I used cutaway, I'm just gonna pull the hat out. And I make sure I'm pulling this stabilizer up and away as I'm cutting. It can be fairly easy to cut into the fabric of your hat, especially if you're using a thinner fabric hat like I am. You know, this is not a structured hat. This is a very loose, thin fabric hat. Alrighty, there we go. So you can just clean this up on the back. We haven't had any problem with that rubbing against our forehead or anything. If you're really concerned about how this might feel, you could always apply some cover up to this, so it's just a fusible, really soft material. You can just cut a piece over, go over it, fuse it on, and then that would help. So the last thing I'm going to do is grab my heat gun and just heat up my foam so that it shrinks back down. So here's my heat gun, and I don't get it all the way hot. I get it up to like the 4th of 6 bars. So I'm gonna let that heat up. It doesn't take more than a few seconds. Maybe the 5th one. Okay, the thing you have to be careful of with heat guns is that they will break the thread if they're there for too long, or they'll burn your material. So we just want to do a quick blast. So I just take it and I just whoop, and you'll see the foam start to shrink down. So I just go in and pull it away real quickly. My hand is underneath it, but I don't keep it there long enough for it to burn my fingers or anything like that. And there you go. There's your hat all done with the knockdown stitch and the 3D puff. I think this looks really, really cool. There's a lot of things we can do with this. All right, what do you think? Aren't these adorable? I love it. I love it. I mean, as crafters, we like to let people know that we made things. So I think this is such a fun, especially like a sewer or a crafter's little handmade hat. I absolutely love these. And I want to show you, this is the hat that I use the heat gun on. So can you see? We really don't have any foam poking out. And this was my original hat that I did not use the heat gun on yet. I don't know if you can see, it's a little bit messy. There's some foam poking out. And that's exactly how this one looked too, until I used the heat gun. So that heat gun is really, really helpful at just tucking in that foam. So I hope that this inspired you to go make a hat if you have the resources necessary. These are really fun to make, adding puff, adding knockdown. I love taking techniques from other things. Like normally knockdown stitching is just a background stitching that we use to defluff things, to use on like baby blankets or beanies, any sort of really fluffy material that's gonna make it hard to see our design in. We do like a knockdown stitching behind it, and then we have a more flat surface to do our embroidery. But I was thinking, you know, why not use knockdown stitching in another way? Let's use it as like a silhouette, as a background image. I think that's cool. And I'm really, really happy with how these turned out. I think that these are very, very cute. So thank you so much for sewing with me today. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. If you make a hat like this, let me know. And if you have any tips at all, make sure you leave them down in the comments section. I'm still learning hats, but we do make a lot of them over here. We definitely make a lot of mistakes. We've learned a lot of little tricks and things along the way. So if you were struggling with hooping or anything like that, I hope this was helpful. I hope you're having a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.